Millionaire finds a wounded woman in his backyard and falls in love, without knowing that. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The sun was slowly setting over the abandoned vineyards of Valle Dorado winery, painting the sky with shades of orange and red that recalled the most prestigious vintages of its glorious past. Eric Molina, 45, was looking out the window of his library at the landscape, a glass of red wine in his calloused hands. His green eyes, once bright with passion for the winemaking profession, now bore the weight of 10 years of isolation and disbelief. The Molina's ancestral mansion, built by his great-grandfather in the early 20th century, was a silent testament to a long-lost golden age. The hallways, once full of life and laughter, now echoed only with the footsteps of Doña Marina, the housekeeper who had remained by his side even after the scandal that destroyed his reputation as an award-winning winemaker. "Mr. Eric," Marina's voice rang out, "dinner is served." He didn't answer right away, his thoughts lost among the vines that stretched to the horizon. Those same vines that had once produced the legendary Valle Dorado Reserva Especial 1985, the wine that put the winery on the world map, and that was now, ironically, just a bitter memory. "I'm not hungry, Marina," he finally replied without taking his eyes off the landscape. "You can save it for later." The housekeeper, a grey-haired lady with a kind face, hesitated at the door. After so many years, she knew her master's moods well. "You need to eat. You can't live on memories and wine alone." Eric turned to face her, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Memories are all I have left, Marina. That and this land I no longer know how to cultivate." The wind blew hard outside, making the leaves on the vines dance a melancholy waltz. Eric had always thought that the sound of the wind among the vines had something musical about it, like a natural symphony that accompanied the ripening of the grapes. Now, however, that music sounded like a requiem for his lost dreams. The last decade had been particularly cruel. After the incident that destroyed an entire premium harvest and tarnished his name in the wine market, Eric closed himself off from the world. The rumors of sabotage were never proven, and his reputation as a winemaker was irreparably damaged. Buyers began to cancel orders, premiums were questioned, and little by little, Valle Dorado, which had once been synonymous with excellence, became just another winery on the verge of bankruptcy in the interior of the country. Marina watched her employer with maternal concern. She was there when it all happened, when the fermentation tanks were found contaminated, when journalists surrounded the property like vultures, when employees began leaving one by one. She watched Eric transform from a man passionate about his art into a shadow of his former self. "Perhaps it's time to try again, sir," she suggested softly. "The vines are still there, waiting for care. You always said that good wines come from good stories." Eric let out a heavy sigh. "Some stories don't have happy endings, Marina. You of all people should know that." A distant thunder cracked through the air, announcing an approaching storm. Eric frowned, concerned at the sudden change in the weather. The forecast didn't call for rain that night. "I'll check if all the windows are closed," Marina said, already turning to leave. "Wait." Eric stopped her. "Did you hear that?" For a moment they were both completely silent. The sound came again, louder this time, a mechanical noise unlike anything they had heard on the estate before. It was as if something large was cutting through the air, rapidly, approaching. "It looks like a—" Marina began, but didn't have time to finish the sentence. The deafening roar of a failing engine filled the air, followed by a loud crash that shook the windows of the mansion. Eric ran to the porch, his heart pounding for the first time in years. On the horizon, a column of smoke rose between the hills of his estate, tinting the already dark sky with shades of grey and red. The rain began to fall in thick drops as Eric and Marina hurried down the dirt road that cut through the vineyards. The flash of lightning illuminated their path, revealing the sinister outlines of abandoned vines. The smell of wet earth mingled with the acrid odor of fuel coming from the direction of the accident. "Mr. Eric, shouldn't we call the authorities?" Marina asked, trying to keep up with her boss's long strides. "And wait hours for them to get here," he replied without slowing his pace. "There might be someone there who needs help." After 15 minutes of walking through the storm, they reached a clearing between the hills. The place was unrecognizable. Pieces of twisted metal scattered across the ground, deep, gouges in the earth, and a few vines torn off by the force of the impact. But there was no sign of the helicopter itself, nor of its occupants. "Impossible," Eric muttered, circling the flashlight. "There must be someone around here." As if in answer to her call, a faint moan echoed in the darkness. Marina pointed her flashlight in the direction of the sound, and there, half hidden among the vines, stood a woman. Her elegant dress was torn and dirty, and a trickle of blood ran down her forehead. Eric ran to her, kneeling in the wet earth. The woman was unconscious but breathing. Her black hair framed a delicate face, and her hands, though bruised, showed signs of refinement. "We need to get her to the mansion," Eric decided, carefully taking her in his arms. "Marina, please find some identification, a purse, anything." The housekeeper searched the surrounding area, but found nothing other than a few pieces of what appeared to be a destroyed briefcase. No documents, no cell phone, nothing that could reveal the identity of the mysterious woman. Back at the mansion, they settled the stranger in one of the guest rooms. Marina expertly cleaned her wounds and changed her wet clothes into dry, comfortable ones, while Eric tried unsuccessfully to make a call. The storm had knocked out the phone signal in the area. "She must be about 35, Marina observed, adjusting the blankets. "And from the type of clothes she was wearing, she looks like she could be a businesswoman or something." Eric studied the woman's face curiously. There was something familiar about her, as if he had seen her before, perhaps in a magazine or newspaper. Her features were striking, well-defined eyebrows, a delicate nose, full lips. Even unconscious, her presence emanated a singular strength. The hours dragged on into the night. Eric refused to leave the room, settling into an armchair next to the bed. Marina brought him coffee and tried to convince him to rest, but it was in vain. There was something about the situation that intrigued him deeply. After years of isolation, fate had literally thrown a stranger into his path. It was past 3 in the morning when the woman began to stir. Her eyes slowly opened, revealing irises of an extraordinary amber hue. For a moment, she seemed confused, looking around without recognizing where she was. "It's okay," Eric walked over, speaking softly so as not to scare her. "You were in an accident, but you're safe now." The woman tried to sit up, but a pained expression crossed her face. Where am I?" "At Valle Dorado Winery. We found you near the hills. Do you remember what happened?" She frowned, as if trying to organize her thoughts. I don't remember anything. Not the accident, not how I got here, not—" Her voice trailed off, and a flash of panic crossed her eyes. "I don't even remember my own name." Dawn brought with it a thick fog that covered the vineyards like a white blanket. At the mansion, the mysterious woman sat on the porch, wrapped in a woolen shawl lent by Marina, her hands holding a cup of hot tea. Her amber eyes roamed the landscape with a mixture of fascination and uneasiness. "How are you feeling?" Eric asked, approaching cautiously. After a full night of vigil, his own features were tired, but there was a different light in his eyes. "Physically better," she replied, turning to face him. "But it's strange. It's as if I'm living in a hazy dream. I have impressions, sensations, knowledge, but no concrete memories." Eric pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. The sun was beginning to disperse the haze, gradually revealing the rows of vines that stretched to the horizon. "The doctor who examined you remotely said it's common in cases of trauma. The amnesia can be temporary." The woman nodded, her fingers tapping gently on the cup. "You know what's so funny? Looking at these vineyards, I can tell the grape varieties. Those ones over there," she pointed to a specific section, "are Merlot, aren't they? And up ahead, Cabernet. Sauvignon." Eric sat up straight in surprise. "That's right, how do you know that?" "I can't explain it," she frowned in concentration. "It's like the knowledge is there, but the memories of how I acquired it are just gone." Marina appeared on the balcony carrying a tray with breakfast. As she served, she watched the interaction between the two attentively. There was something in the stranger's posture, in the way she carried herself, that suggested refinement and formal education. The vineyards looked like they need some attention, the woman said after a moment of silence. The pruning is uneven, and from what I can see, the irrigation system needs urgent maintenance. Eric stiffened visibly. The winery has been facing difficulties in recent years. I'm sorry, she said quickly, noticing his discomfort. I didn't mean to intrude, it's just... She hesitated, closing her eyes for a moment. I get flashes, images of wineries, meetings, numbers, spreadsheets, but it's also fragmented. Marina, who had remained silent until then, approached to collect the empty cups. As she did so, she noticed something on the back of the woman's neck, a small mark, partially covered by her black hair. It wasn't quite a scar, more like a faded tattoo. The housekeeper narrowed her eyes, an old memory tugging at the corners of her mind. We need to give you a name, Eric said, breaking the tense moment. We can't keep calling you the woman indefinitely. She smiled, the first genuine smile since waking up. You're right, but which one? How about Aurora? Marina suggested, her voice carrying a tone that Eric couldn't decipher. Since you arrived during the night and woke up with the dawn. The suggestion was met with general approval, and so the mysterious woman was given a name, albeit a temporary one. Aurora stood up carefully, her movement still showing some discomfort, and walked to the balcony railing. Mr. Molina, she said, her voice taking on a professional tone that seemed to come naturally. I know I'm a stranger who literally fell from the sky onto your property, but I have a proposition to make. Eric arched an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of proposal? Let me help you with the vineyard. She turned to face him, her amber eyes shining with determination. I don't know who I am, but I know about wine, about farm management, about production processes. I can see the potential that lies dormant in these lands. Why would I do that? He asked, his voice betraying a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Because, Aurora replied, her gaze sweeping over the vineyards once more. Until I regain my memories, I need to hold on to something real, something tangible. And there's something about these vineyards that calls to me as if... She stopped abruptly, pressing a hand to her temple. A series of images flooded her mind. A luxurious conference room, maps spread out on a mahogany table, voices discussing numbers, and acquisitions. The vision was so sudden and intense that she staggered. Eric caught Aurora before she could fall, his hands finding her shoulders firmly. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and something indefinable passed between them. Marina watched the scene, with an enigmatic expression, her suspicions growing by the minute. Are you okay? Eric asked, his voice betraying a concern he hadn't felt for anyone in a long time. Aurora nodded slowly, composing herself. Yes, it was just a flash. It happens sometimes, random images without context. Maybe you should rest a little longer, Marina suggested, but Aurora shook her head. No, in fact, I'd like to see more of the property, if you'll allow it, Mr. Molina. Eric hesitated for a moment. It had been years since he had led a tour of the Golden Valley grounds. Since the scandal, the only people who had come through the gates were occasional suppliers and the few employees he still had. Call me Eric, he said finally. And yes, I can show you around the property. The morning passed with the two of them touring the various sectors of the winery. Aurora absorbed every detail with an almost technical curiosity, asking precise questions about production processes, equipment, and grape varieties. Her knowledge was impressive, and even more surprising, it seemed natural, as if it were part of her essence. These fermentation tanks, she noted, running her hand over the stainless steel surface, are excellent quality, but they need maintenance. With some adjustments to the temperature control and a new monitoring system, we could... She paused, noticing the dark expression that crossed Eric's face. I'm sorry, I'm being nosy again. No, go on, he replied, his voice hoarse. It's just, this is where it all happened. 10 years ago, an entire crop was lost. The tanks were contaminated, and my reputation... Aurora touched his arm gently. Sometimes the biggest disasters can be the beginning of something new. Believe me, even though I don't remember who I am, I feel like I understand new beginnings." Eric stared at her, surprised by the depth of her words. There was something about Aurora's presence that intrigued him more and more. It was as if she carried a wisdom that went beyond technical knowledge, a deep understanding of human nature. "Mr. Eric," the voice of one of the employees cut through the moment, "we found something strange in the vineyards on the North Hill." Following, the employee Eric and Aurora arrived at a more remote area of the property. There, among the oldest grapevines, an unexpected discovery awaited them, a partially covered entrance leading to what appeared to be an underground wine cellar. "Impossible," Eric muttered. "I know every inch of this property." Aurora approached the entrance, her eyes shining with curiosity. Judging by the structure and position, it must be an old wine cellar, probably from the early 20th century, when it was common to build underground cellars to mature special wines. "How do you know that?" Eric asked, increasingly impressed by her knowledge. She frowned, concentrating. "I don't know. It's like the information is just there, waiting to be accessed." With the help of the staff, they managed to clear the entrance. The air coming out of the cellar carried a peculiar aroma, a mixture of earth, old wood, and wine. Eric turned on a lantern, and together, he and Aurora descended the stone steps. What they found left them speechless. Rows and rows of old bottles, covered in a thin layer of dust. On the walls, framed documents, some yellowed with age, telling the story of Valle Dorado since its founding. "Eric," Aurora whispered, her voice shaking with emotion, "this isn't just a wine cellar. It's a historical treasure trove. These bottles, they're from the legendary 1985 vintage, aren't they?" He nodded, unable to speak. This discovery could change everything. With the historical documentation and the rare bottles, the winery could apply for cultural heritage status, ensuring its protection and perhaps a new beginning. Aurora turned to him, her amber eyes shining in the dim light. "Now do you see why I want to help? This winery is not just a business. It is part of the history of wine in this country, and stories like this deserve to continue to be told." At that moment, under the dim light of the newly discovered cellar, something changed between them. It was as if the past and the present had met, paving the way for a future neither of them could have foreseen. In the mansion's kitchen, Marina prepared dinner while watching Aurora and Eric walk through the vineyards through the window. In recent days, the presence of the mysterious woman had brought a noticeable change not only to the property, but especially to her boss. It was as if a long-extinguished light had been rekindled in his eyes. However, something was bothering her. The mark on the back of Aurora's neck, that partially faded tattoo, stirred a persistent memory. Marina was sure she had seen something similar before, in a magazine or newspaper article, but she couldn't pinpoint where or when. Outside, Aurora was excitedly explaining her plans for the winery. "If we implement a drip irrigation system, in the most critical areas, we can reduce water consumption by up to 40%. And look at these vines here." She gently touched one of the branches. "With proper pruning, they can be back to producing premium quality grapes in 2 harvests." Eric watched her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. In just 1 week, Aurora had reorganized processes, motivated employees, and presented a recovery plan that seemed not only feasible, but promising. It was as if she had been born to do this. "How do you do it?" he asked, stopping to watch the sunset that tinted the sky pink and gold. "What?" Aurora turned to him, her amber eyes reflecting the evening light. "Seeing possibilities where I only saw ruins. Believing that something can be saved when everyone, including me, had already given up." Aurora smiled, a smile that lit up her entire face. "Maybe because I'm a kind of ruin in the making myself. Every day that passes, I feel like I'm recovering little fragments of who I am, but—" She hesitated, her expression turning serious. "Sometimes I'm afraid of what I might discover." Eric took a step toward her, instinctively wanting to comfort her, when a sharp buzz cut through the air. Overhead, a drone was hovering over the vineyards, its camera clearly focused on them. "This isn't normal," Eric frowned in concern. "We've—" never had drones around here before. Aurora felt a shiver run down her spine. For a brief moment, the sight of the drone gave her an odd feeling, as if it must mean something important. Another flash of memory hit her. A modern conference room, screens showing aerial views of rural properties, voices discussing acquisition strategies. "Aurora?" Eric's voice brought her back to the present. "You look pale." "I'm fine," she assured, but her voice shook slightly. Just another flash of memory, but different from the others. This one felt more real, closer. Back at the mansion, they found Marina organizing old documents found in the secret cellar. The housekeeper looked up as they entered, noticing the closeness between the two. "I found something interesting," she said, holding up a stack of yellowed papers. "These are historical records of the founding of the winery. According to these documents, Valle Dorado was one of the first wineries in the country to implement European winemaking techniques. This makes it eligible for registration as a cultural heritage site." "It's extraordinary," Aurora approached, her eyes scanning the documents with professional interest. "With this kind of documentation, we can not only protect the winery, but also attract investment in its preservation." Eric watched the two women poring over the old papers, a strange feeling growing in his chest. In just a few days, Aurora had become indispensable, bringing not only technical expertise, but also a refreshing energy that was contagious. Marina, for her part, continued to study Aurora discreetly. There was something about the way she analyzed documents, the way she conducted meetings with employees, that suggested more than just natural knowledge. It was experience, years of practice, in management and negotiation. That night, after dinner, the housekeeper decided to do some research on her tablet. The mark on the back of Aurora's neck kept coming back to her. After hours of browsing through old business news articles, her eyes widened. There it was, a 3-year-old photo showing executives from a large corporation at an event. And there, prominently displayed in the image, was a woman from behind with the same distinctive mark on the back of her neck. Marina felt her heart sink. If her suspicions were correct, Aurora's true identity could change everything. But how could she tell Eric? How could she risk the happiness that was finally shining in her boss's eyes again? Dawn brought with it an unusual commotion in Golden Valley. Julio, the irrigation system supervisor, was running toward the mansion, his face flushed with worry. Eric and Aurora, who were drinking coffee on the porch, stood up immediately when they saw him approaching. "Mr. Eric," Julio gasped. "The irrigation system. Someone sabotaged it during the night. The main valves have been damaged and several areas are without water." Aurora felt her blood run cold. Without proper irrigation, the vines could suffer irreversible damage, especially now that they had begun the recovery process. Eric was already running toward the vineyards, with her close behind. The scene was desolate. The main valves had clearly been tampered with by someone familiar with the system. This was no random act of vandalism, but technically executed sabotage. "This was done by someone who understands irrigation," Aurora said, surveying the damage. "Someone who knows the property." Eric ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "But who and why? Now that we were finally getting the winery back..." Aurora touched his arm gently. "Let's not give up hope. I can rearrange the crews to manual irrigation while we fix the system. It will take more work, but we can save the vines." As they organized the employees into emergency groups, Marina watched everything from the mansion's balcony. Her tablet was still showing the news report she had found the night before, and her mind worked tirelessly, connecting the dots. The day was a race against time. Aurora led the teams with impressive efficiency, demonstrating not only technical knowledge, but also natural leadership skills. The employees followed her without question, infected by her determination. Eric watched her work, his heart racing every time their eyes met. It was undeniable that his feelings for Aurora were growing with each passing day, but there was also something different in the air since the sabotage, an underlying tension, as if a secret hung over them all. Later that afternoon, when the situation was under control, Aurora found Eric in his office studying the property's security cameras. "Did you find anything?" she asked, coming closer. "Yes, but it's disturbing," he replied, showing the footage. "Look here, someone in a winery uniform knowing all the camera's blind spots. It was an inside job." Aurora felt a twinge in her temple, another memory trying to surface. Images of secret meetings, confidential documents, hostile takeover strategies. She swayed slightly, leaning against the table. "What's wrong?" Eric held her by the waist, worried. "More flashes," she replied, her voice shaking. "More frequent, more intense. It's like my past is trying to catch up with me." Their faces were close now, very close. Eric could smell Aurora's soft scent, see the golden glow in her amber eyes. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Mr. Eric," Julio's voice broke the moment. "Mateo, the irrigation technician, he's disappeared. His locker is empty and no one can reach him." The revelation came as a bombshell. Mateo was one of the oldest employees, having worked at the winery for over 15 years. His sudden escape only confirmed their suspicions. He was the saboteur. But why? Eric wondered aloud. Why now? Why after so many years? Aurora felt a chill run down her spine. Something in her mind screamed that there was a connection, that she should know the answer. But the memories remained slippery, like shadows fleeing. The light. Marina, who had silently entered the office, watched the scene with worried eyes. In her hands was the tablet with the report that could change everything. But seeing the way Eric looked at Aurora, how their bodies unconsciously leaned towards each other, she once again hesitated. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the vineyards golden. Valle Dorado had survived yet another attack, but the question remained, who was behind all this, and what would be their next move? The news of the regional wine festival came through a colorful poster that Marina found in the city. Aurora studied it with interest, while Eric shook his head negatively. "We can't participate," he argued, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Valle Dorado isn't ready. After the sabotage of the irrigation system, we've barely managed to stabilize production." "On the contrary," Aurora countered, her eyes shining with determination. "It's exactly the right time. The festival is in 2 weeks and we have something no other winery has, the bottles of the 1985 vintage we found in the secret cellar." Eric paused, cup suspended in midair. "You're not suggesting—" "Yes, I am," she smiled, that smile that always made his heart race. "We're going to participate in a blind tasting with a wine from the legendary vintage. It will be our chance to show that Valle Dorado has not only survived, but maintained its excellence through the decades." Marina, who was discreetly organizing the correspondence, watched their interaction with attentive eyes. In the last few weeks, since the sabotage, the closeness between them had grown visibly. It was as if the shared danger had created an even stronger bond. "Aurora," Eric sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she now recognized as a sign of surrender. "Do you realize the risk? If something goes wrong, what if it works?" She reached out, gently touching his arm. "Think about it, Eric. The festival attracts investors, the press, experts. It's our chance to reclaim Valle Dorado's place in the national wine scene." A flash of memory hit Aurora at that moment. She herself had been at a similar festival, but on the other side, sizing up wineries, analyzing potential acquisitions. The feeling was so strong that she had to lean against the table. "Another flash?" Eric asked softly, holding out his hand. "Yes," she replied, catching her breath. "More and more often. It's like my past is trying to tell me something important." Marina cleared her throat discreetly, drawing their attention. "If I may say so, I think Miss Aurora is right. Golden Valley needs this new beginning, and perhaps—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Perhaps it is time to face all the ghosts of the past." Preparations for the festival took up the following days. Aurora coordinated everything with impressive efficiency, as if she had been born for it. Her natural leadership captivated the staff, who worked with renewed enthusiasm. Eric found her one night in the secret cellar where she was carefully cataloguing the old bottles. The candlelight, she insisted that artificial lighting could affect the wines, created dancing shadows on the stone walls. "How do you do that?" he asked, leaning against one of the columns. "Do what?" She looked up from her notebook where she was taking notes. "It brings life back to places and people. Since you arrived, it's as if Valle Dorado is waking up from a long sleep." Aurora put the notebook aside and approached him. In the intimate space of the wine cellar, the air seemed charged with electricity. "Maybe because I'm waking up myself," she whispered. "Every day here, every moment with you, it's like I'm recovering not just memories, but parts of myself I never knew existed." Eric took a step toward her, their bodies now inches apart. The soft scent of aged wine mixed with her perfume, creating an intoxicating atmosphere. "Aurora, Shh," she placed a finger over her lips. "Some things don't need to be said." The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, like a first glass of wine sipped with reverence. When they broke apart, they both knew something fundamental had changed. The day of the festival, Valle Dorado was unrecognizable. The vines, though still recovering, were vibrantly green in the morning sun. The mansion had been prepared to receive visitors, and in the center of it all, protected like a treasure, was the chosen bottle of the 1985 vintage. Marina watched the final preparations with a heavy heart. The tablet in her room still held the revelation that could change everything, but now, seeing the genuine happiness in Eric's eyes, she wondered if some truths shouldn't remain buried like wine in a forgotten cellar. The regional wine festival transformed the small inland town into a bustling hub of activity. Experts, journalists, and wine enthusiasts milled around the stands, tasting, evaluating, and discussing the dozens of labels on display. Valle Dorado's stand, although modest, attracted curious glances. The return of the traditional winery to the event circuit was news in itself, and rumors about a special presentation were circulating through the festival. Corridors, Aurora looked stunning in a burgundy gown, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun that exposed her delicate neck, and, unbeknownst to her, the mysterious mark on the back of her neck. She handled the introductions with a grace that impressed Eric. "It's incredible how she masters all the technical aspects," one of the judges commented to Eric. "Does your sommelier have international training?" "Actually," Eric began, but was interrupted by the announcement that the blind tasting was about to begin. The crucial moment had arrived. The judges gathered in a closed room where several bottles, all without labels, awaited evaluation. Among them was Valle Dorado's treasure, a bottle from the 1985 vintage, carefully preserved for decades in the secret cellar. Outside the room, Aurora paced nervously. What if something goes wrong? What if the wine isn't preserved well? What if... Eric interrupted her with a soft kiss. "It'll work out. You've brought new life to Golden Valley. Whatever the outcome, we've already won." The following hours were spent waiting tensely. Marina, who was observing everything from a distance, noticed a group of executives who seemed particularly interested in Valle Dorado's activities. Their gazes alternated between Aurora and their tablets, as if confirming something. Finally, the judges emerged from the tasting room. The president of the jury, a renowned international winemaker, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, in my 30 years of evaluating wines, I have rarely had the privilege of tasting something as extraordinary as sample number 7. A wine that defies time while maintaining the complexity and elegance that only the great labels can achieve." Aurora's heart raced. Sample number 7. It was the Valle Dorado wine. It is with great pleasure that we announce the winner of the special category of this festival, Valle Dorado 1985 Vintage. The burst of applause was deafening. Eric hugged Aurora tightly, spinning, her around in the air as tears of joy glistened in both their eyes. Marina applauded with a bittersweet smile, watching the executives in the background frantically take notes on their devices. "This changes everything," Aurora whispered in Eric's ear. "Golden Valley is back on the map." And it was. In the following minutes, they were surrounded by journalists, investors, and representatives of other wineries. Everyone wanted to know more about the winning wine, the history of the winery, and its plans for the future. Amidst the confusion, Aurora walked away to get some water. That was when she passed a magazine stand set up at the festival, specializing in wine industry publications. Her eyes ran absently over the covers until the shock made her reel. There it was in a business magazine from the previous year. There was no mistaking it. The same face, the same amber eyes, the same mark on the back of her neck. The headline was devastating. Elisa Müller, the ruthless CEO of the Vale Verde Corporation, announces plan to acquire traditional wineries. Memories flooded her mind like a torrent. Board meetings, aggressive acquisition strategies, plans to transform family-owned wineries into large-scale commercial enterprises. She was Elisa Müller, the executive known for her cold-blooded business dealings, the woman who had planned the demise of places just like Valle Dorado. Aurora, no. Elisa felt the world spin. In the distance, she could hear Eric calling her name, celebrating the triumph they had achieved together. The same Eric she, in her previous life, had marked as her next target for acquisition. The return to Valle Dorado after the festival was marked by a heavy silence in the car. Aurora, now aware that she was Elisa Müller, kept her eyes fixed on the landscape passing by the window, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Eric, still ecstatic about the victory, did not notice his companion's internal torment. Marina, in the back seat, watched everything with attentive eyes. She had noticed the sudden change in Aurora during the festival, the exact moment when something seemed to break inside her. The housekeeper knew that the moment of truth was approaching. When they arrived at the mansion, they were greeted by a surprise. 3 executive cars parked at the main entrance. A group of men and women in impeccable suits were waiting for them. "Miss Müller," one of the executives said, "it's good to see you in good health. We've all been very worried since the helicopter accident." Eric turned sharply to Aurora, confusion written all over his face. "Müller? What is he talking about?" Aurora felt her heart sink. This wasn't how she planned to tell the truth. In fact, ever since she had regained her memories hours ago, she had been struggling to find a way to reveal her true identity without destroying everything they had built. "Eric, I can explain," she began, but was interrupted by another executive. "Mr. Molina, allow me to introduce Elisa Müller, CEO of the Vale Verde Corporation. We were monitoring the area after her helicopter crash when we discovered she was here." Eric's face paled. The Verde Valley Corporation was a well-known name in the wine industry, a giant that had been buying up and dismantling traditional wineries to make way for large-scale commercial ventures. "So that was it," he whispered, his voice thick with disappointment. "The wine expertise, the interest in restoring the winery, it was all part of a plan." "No," Aurora Elisa took a step toward him, but Eric backed away. "At first I didn't remember anything, and then everything changed. I changed." Marina chose that moment to intervene. "Mr. Eric, I think we all need to talk. There's more to this story than meets the eye." The executives, sensing the tension of the situation, tried to take control. "Miss Müller, the board is awaiting your return. Important decisions are pending regarding the planned acquisitions." Elisa felt a wave of nausea at the word acquisitions. Memories of meetings where they had coldly discussed the fate of families who had dedicated generations to winemaking flooded her mind. How could it have been that person? "No," she said firmly, surprising everyone. "I won't be going back today. First, I need to explain everything to Eric. He deserves to know the full truth." The executives exchanged worried glances. "Miss Müller, I need to remind you of your contractual commitments and—" "I said no," her voice echoed across the courtyard, with an authority that revealed the executive she once was. "You can wait one more day. Now, please excuse us." Reluctantly, the executives left, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. Eric was still standing in the same spot, his face a mask of pain and confusion. Marina led everyone to the library, where so many important conversations had already taken place. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of red that seemed to reflect the intensity of the moment. "Eric," Elisa began, her voice shaking slightly. "When I first came here, I really had no memory at all. Every moment we shared, every smile, every discovery was genuine. The woman you fell in love with, the woman who fell in love with you, is as real as the vineyards outside." "But that's not who you really are, is it?" he retorted bitterly. "The real Elisa. Müller is the executive who destroyed dozens of wineries like mine." "That's who I was," she corrected, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Until the accident, until I met you, until I understood the true meaning of creating something with love and dedication." Marina, who had quietly left, returned with her tablet. "Maybe this will help clarify some things," she said, showing the report she had found days earlier. Elisa Müller did not rise to the top of the corporation by chance. It was a meticulously planned rise, including an arranged marriage with one of the directors. Elisa felt the impact of those words. More memories surfaced, the constant pressure, the manipulations, the decisions she had been forced to make. It was as if she was seeing her old life through a new prism, understanding for the first time how much of herself she had lost in the process. Eric remained silent for long minutes, absorbing all the information. Twilight was already dying. The sky purple and the shadows were lengthening in the library, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. "Why did the helicopter crash?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. Elisa took a deep breath. "I was on my way to a crucial meeting. Valle Dorado was the corporation's next acquisition target, but during the flight, I found disturbing documents on my laptop. Records of unethical practices, contract manipulation, deliberate destruction of historical heritage." She paused, the memories now flowing freely. "I confronted my husband, if I can call him that, on the phone. That's when the storm started, and you landed on my property," Eric added, a gleam of understanding dawning in his eyes. "The very winery you were supposed to destroy." Marina, who remained discreet but attentive, noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The initial tension was beginning to give way to something deeper, a mutual understanding that sometimes fate works in mysterious ways. "The sabotage of the irrigation system," Elisa continued, connecting the dots. "Matteo must have been..."
Contacted by the corporation. They found that I wasn't trying to force the situation. Eric stood up and...
"You know what's ironic? You came to destroy Golden Valley, but you ended up saving it." Elisa approached him cautiously. "Eric, I'm not that person anymore. The time I spent here, working the land, understanding the true value of what you've built, it changed me. Or maybe," she smiled sadly, "it gave me back who I really was before I got lost in the corporate world." He turned to face her. His green eyes, once so hurt, now searched for answers. "What now? What happens?" "Now," she replied with determination, "I need to face my past. I can't just ignore what I've learned. About the corporation, those documents I found before the accident, they prove a much larger conspiracy." Marina cleared her throat softly. "Maybe it's time to use the recognition Valle Dorado has gained at the festival. The press is paying attention, investors are interested. What better time to tell a story of rebirth and transformation?" Elisa felt her heart race. The housekeeper was right, it was the perfect time, but there was something more important that needed to be said first. "Eric," she leaned closer, gently touching his face, "I know I betrayed your trust by not telling you the truth as soon as I got my memories back. But I need you to know every moment we spent together, every smile, every kiss, it was real. The woman you knew as Aurora wasn't a lie. She was the truest part of me, the part that had been dormant under years of manipulation and corporate pressure." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Outside, the first stars were beginning to dot the sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of the vines. It was the same scent that had brought them together, that had been a silent witness to their growing love. Eric finally moved, taking her hands in his. You know what I've learned in all these years of making wine? That sometimes the best vintages come from the harshest conditions. The vine has to fight. It has to find strength deep within the earth to produce truly special grapes. His eyes met hers, amber and green merging like the sun and the vines. Maybe we too needed to go through all this to find our true essence. Next morning dawned with a different energy in Valle Dorado. Elisa, still wearing simple clothes that contradicted her true social position, was poring over several documents in the library. Eric and Marina were helping her organize a plan of action. These documents you found before the crash, Eric flipped through a few pages. Are they in the helicopter? Elisa shook her head. No, they're in a safer place. Before I confronted Richard, my ex-husband, I made copies of everything and stored them in a bank safe. It was my life insurance, so to speak. Marina poured more coffee as she watched the two work together. Even after all the revelations, there was a natural synchronicity between them, as if their souls had recognized each other beyond identities and circumstances. The problem, Elisa continued, is that I need my official identification to access the safe, and I'm pretty sure Richard is monitoring all my accounts and documents. But you're the CEO of the company, Eric argued. You can't just... A bitter smile crossed Elisa's lips. The Vale Verde Corporation is more complex than it appears. Richard and his allies have built a web of influence and control over the years. My position as CEO was carefully orchestrated. I was the perfect public face for their operations. Marina, who had remained silent until then, approached the table. Maybe we don't need the original documents now. The festival win gave us visibility. The press is interested in the story of Valle Dorado. And what story could be more interesting than the transformation of a ruthless executive into a defender of traditional wineries? Elisa looked up, an idea beginning to form. Marina, you're brilliant. We can use the media itself as protection. If I tell my story publicly, Richard won't be able to act without drawing unwanted attention. Eric grabbed her hand across the table. Are you sure about this? You'll be exposing yourself completely. That's exactly what I need to do. She squeezed his hand in return. For years, I've been complicit in a system that has destroyed dreams. And stories like yours. It's time to fix that. The plan began to take shape. Using the contacts they had made at the festival, they would organize a press conference at Valle Dorado itself. Elisa would reveal her identity and denounce the corporation's unethical practices. But first, they needed to ensure that the EEFA winery was protected. The historical documents we found in the secret cellar, Elisa leafed through an old dossier, are our first line of defense. With them, we can apply for Valle Dorado's registration as a cultural heritage site before the corporation tries anything. Marina brought more papers, this time old reports about the winery. I found more material in the local archives. The history of Valle Dorado is intertwined with the history of winemaking in the country. As they worked, Elisa couldn't help but notice how right it felt. Here, planning to protect a winery she should have destroyed, alongside a man who should have been just another target, she finally felt complete. Something's bothering me, Eric said, frowning. Matteo, the employee who sabotaged the irrigation system, how did the corporation contact you? How did they know exactly where you were? Elisa felt a shiver run down her spine. The drone. Remember the drone we saw flying over the property? They must have recognized me from the footage. That means they're closer than we think, Marina warned, her expression worried. The sound of approaching cars caught the group's attention. Through the library window, they could see 3 executive vehicles driving through the gates of the property. Elisa immediately recognized the man who got out of the first car, Richard Stanford, her ex-husband, and the architect of the entire corporate conspiracy. He's here, she whispered, her face paling slightly. Eric immediately stood protectively beside her. You're not alone in this, he stated firmly. Not anymore. Elisa took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. The woman who had arrived unconscious at this estate months ago had changed. She was no longer just Aurora, the mysterious wine expert, or Elisa Müller, the ruthless executive. She was someone new, someone who had finally found her true purpose. Richard Stanford walked across the courtyard of the Golden Valley with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Tall, elegant, with perfectly straight grey hair, he carried a thin leather briefcase in one hand. His cold eyes scanned the mansion's facade with calculating interest. "Elisa, my dear," her honeyed voice echoed through the entrance hall as Marina opened the door. "I'm so glad to see you're safe. We were all so worried." Elisa, who was now standing next to Eric in the library, felt her stomach churn at his false concern. "Spare me the act, Richard. What do you want?" He walked into the library as if he owned the place, his eyes taking in every detail. The other executives remained outside like silent bodyguards. Straight to the point, as always, Richard smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I came to pick you up, of course. The council is anxiously awaiting your return, and we have several pending projects." "Projects?" Elisa laughed humorlessly. "You mean the systematic destruction of family-owned wineries? The transformation of cultural heritage sites into soulless businesses?" Richard placed his briefcase on the table, his face taking on a more serious expression. "Don't be dramatic, Elisa. It's just business. And you've always been excellent at it. Or have you forgotten how many wineries you've personally evaluated for acquisition?" Eric, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "She's not that person anymore." "Ah, yes," Richard turned to him with a condescending smile. "The romantic owner of Valle Dorado. Should I congratulate him on his festival win?" It was a clever move to use a vintage wine to attract attention. "It wasn't a ploy," Elisa interjected, her voice firm. "It was a recognition of the true value of this winery, something you would never understand." Marina, who was watching everything from the door, noticed movement in the yard. More cars were arriving, these with the logos of television stations. The plan was underway. Richard noticed as well. His face hardened momentarily before he regained his composure. "What do you think you're doing, Elisa?" "Which I should have done a long time ago," she replied, walking to the window. "I am exposing the truth about the corporation, about your practices, about the system you built to destroy centuries-old traditions." He opened his briefcase, pulling out some documents. "I think you forgot some important details of your contract. Confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure agreements, which become null and void when there is evidence of illegal practices," Elisa added. "Or did you forget the documents I found before the accident with the helicopter?" For the first time, Richard showed real concern. "Those documents were destroyed in the accident." "Are you sure?" Elisa smiled, a smile reminiscent of her days as a ruthless CEO. "I've always been excellent at business, remember? And the first rule is to always have a plan B." Outside, journalists were beginning to weigh in. The story of the transformed CEO, who was now fighting to preserve traditional wineries, would be irresistible to the media. And once the story broke, there would be no way Richard could suppress it. "You're making a terrible mistake," he hissed, his mask of civility beginning to crack. "No, Richard," Elisa replied calmly. "The mistake was allowing people like you to turn something as special as wine production into mere numbers on a spreadsheet. Every winery has a story, a tradition, a soul, and I will no longer be an instrument in the destruction of those stories." Eric stepped closer to her side. Together they made a powerful picture. The retired executive and the traditional winemaker united in defense of something greater than themselves. The Valle Dorado courtyard had been transformed into an improvised studio. Cameras, microphones, and lights were strategically set up, creating a setting that combined the rusticity of the winery with the modernity of live broadcasting. The main news channels were present, attracted by the promise of a bombshell revelation in the corporate world. Elisa, now dressed in an elegant suit that Marina had provided, watched the preparations from one of the mansion's windows. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the lapel microphone. "You don't have to do this," Eric said softly, coming up behind her. "We can find another way." She turned to face him, a determined smile on her lips. "I do. Not just for Valle Dorado, but for all the other wineries that could become targets of the corporation. It's time to break this cycle." Richard stood in the library, his cold eyes fixed on a tablet where he was monitoring the real-time quotes of Vale Verde's shares. Two of his executives were talking nervously on the phone, trying to control the damage before it even happened. Marina hurried into the room. "Everything is ready. The journalists are in place and the broadcast will begin in 5 minutes." Elisa took a deep breath, smoothing back a stray lock of hair. Her reflection in the mirror showed a different woman than the one who had arrived unconscious at the winery months ago. She was no longer just Aurora, nor just Elisa. She was a fusion of the two, someone who had finally found her true purpose. "Gentlemen," one of the producers called from the doorway, "we're ready to begin." The group descended the mansion's stairs. Richard made one last attempt to stop the inevitable. "Think about it, Elisa. You're about to destroy everything we've built." "No, Richard," she replied without hesitation. "I'm about to build something new, something better." The cameras began to roll. Elisa took her place on the improvised set, with the Valle Dorado vineyard stretching to the horizon in the background. Eric and Marina remained nearby, offering silent support. "Good afternoon, everyone," Elisa began, her voice firm and clear. "My name is Elisa Müller, and until 3 months ago I was the CEO of Vale Verde Corporation. Today I am here to tell a story of transformation, redemption, and the discovery of the true meaning of value." The words flowed naturally as she recounted her journey, the helicopter crash, her memory loss, her welcome at Valle Dorado. But it was when she began to reveal the corporation's predatory practices that the real impact was felt. Vale Verde wasn't just buying wineries, she explained, her voice thick with restrained emotion. It was systematically destroying cultural heritage, family histories, and centuries-old traditions, all in the name of profit. Richard, who was watching from inside the mansion, began receiving frantic messages on his cell phone. The company's shares plummeted with each new revelation. "But today," Elisa continued, "I'm not here just to expose these practices. I'm here to propose an alternative, a new business model that preserves the essence of traditional wineries while preparing them for the future." She then presented her vision, a consortium of family-owned wineries networked together, sharing knowledge and resources while maintaining their identity and autonomy. Valle Dorado would be the pilot project, demonstrating how tradition and innovation could work together. During my recovery here, she glanced briefly at Eric, a soft smile on her lips, "I've learned that true value isn't in spreadsheets or financial reports. It's in the stories each bottle of wine carries, in the knowledge passed down from generation to generation, in the love of the land and the craft." Social media exploded with the broadcast. Hashtags related to Valle Dorado, and the complaint began to appear in trending topics. Other wineries that had been pressured by Vale Verde began to speak out, corroborating Elisa's revelations. The live broadcast had only ended an hour ago, but its effects were already reverberating throughout the country. Elisa's cell phone kept receiving notifications, messages of support, requests for interviews, expressions of interest from other wineries in her consortium project. Richard had left minutes after the broadcast ended, his face a mask of suppressed fury. "This isn't over," were his last words before getting into his executive car. In the mansion's library, now free from the suffocating presence of Vale Verde executives, Elisa, Eric, and Marina analyzed the immediate repercussions. "The corporation's stock has fallen 30% in the last 2 hours, Marina reported, checking the news on her tablet. "The board of directors has called an emergency meeting." Eric poured 3 glasses of the award-winning 1985 vintage. "To the truth," he proposed in a toast, his gaze meeting Elisa's with a mixture of pride and affection. "To transformation," she added, raising her glass. The ruby liquid glistened against the evening light streaming through the windows. Marina smiled, watching the couple. "To Valle Dorado," she added, "and to all the new beginnings it has provided." The sound of more cars arriving caught the group's attention. Through the window, they could see several local winery owners approaching the mansion. Some of them had been at the festival days before. They came because of the consortium, Elisa realized, her heart racing at the possibility. "They want to know more about the proposal." Eric took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Then let us welcome them, show them that there is a different path, that preservation and progress can go hand in hand. As they descended to greet the visitors, Elisa reflected on how her life had completely changed in just a few months. The cold, calculating executive who had arrived by helicopter with plans of destruction had transformed into someone who now fought to preserve what she had previously considered obsolete. The courtyard at Valle Dorado was filled with excited voices. Winery owners chatted among themselves, sharing similar stories of corporate pressure and resistance. There was a sense of hope in the air, as if a new era were beginning. "Gentlemen," Elisa called to the group's attention, her voice carrying the same authority as ever, but now tempered with compassion. "Welcome to Golden Valley. Today we are not just discussing business, we are discussing heritage, tradition, and the future." Eric watched in awe as she presented her vision for the consortium. Elisa had retained her business skills, but now she used them to build, not destroy. It was as if she had finally found her true calling. Marina circulated among the guests, pouring more of the award-winning wine, her heart lightening at the sight of the mansion once again filled with life and purpose. The housekeeper, who had witnessed so many years of isolation, was now witnessing a rebirth not only of the winery, but of the people she had grown to love as family. The stars were beginning to dot the sky as the last visitors left, all committed to the idea of the consortium. Elisa and Eric walked hand in hand to the vineyards, where it all had begun. "You know," she said, pausing to survey the grapevines that now thrived under their joint care, "when I got my memory back, my biggest fear was losing it all. Losing you." Eric pulled her close, his eyes reflecting the twinkling stars. "Some things are stronger than memories or identities. What we've built here, what we've found in each other, is real." A week after the live broadcast, Valle Dorado was in a state of flurry of activity. The winery consortium project was taking shape, with daily meetings and a steady stream of owners interested in participating in the initiative. Elisa had transformed the old library into an operations center, where maps, blueprints, and documents covered nearly every available surface. On that particular morning, she was poring over the consortium's strategic planning when Marina hurried into the room. "Elisa, you need to see this." The housekeeper held out her tablet, where a news item caught her attention. Vale Verde Corporation calls for an extraordinary meeting. Changes in the board of directors are expected. Elisa frowned, quickly reading the article. Richard is fighting back. He's going to try to maintain control of the company before investors demand a full investigation. Eric, who had just entered the library carrying fresh coffee, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "But you have the evidence in the safe, don't you?" "Yes, but—" She hesitated, a disturbing thought crossing her mind. "Richard knows all my previous movements. He must be monitoring the vault, waiting for me to try to access it." Marina, who had become not just a confidant, but a valuable strategist, suggested, "What if we use this to our advantage?" The three spent the next few hours coming up with a plan. Meanwhile, more news came in about suspicious activity in Vale Verde. Richard was clearly trying to cover his tracks and cement his position before Elisa's allegations could be fully investigated. "The timing has to be perfect," Elisa explained. Now surrounded by a small group of allies that included lawyers and some former Vale Verde executives who had decided to support her. "While I distract Richard with an attempt to access the main vault, we need someone to retrieve the documents from the real location." Eric watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. The woman who had come to his property lost now ran a complex operation with the same grace she had tended the vines, and he had fallen in love with both versions of her. The next morning, the plan was put into action. Elisa made her way to the city's main bank, knowing that she would be followed by Richard's men. Meanwhile, Marina, accompanied by a trusted lawyer, went to a small bank branch on the outskirts of the city. The tension was palpable. At the main bank, Elisa faced the bureaucracy Richard had deliberately orchestrated to prevent her from accessing any accounts. News cameras were gathered outside, anonymously alerted to her presence. That's when his cell phone vibrated with a message from Marina. "Documents recovered. We're on our way." Almost simultaneously, Richard burst into the bank, his normally controlled face now contorted into a mask of fury. "Where are the real documents, Elisa?" She smiled, that smile she used in important negotiations. "Exactly where you never thought to look, Richard. The same bank where you opened your first account 40 years ago. That little bank you considered too insignificant to bother with." His face paled. Elisa continued, her voice carrying years of knowledge about the man who once thought he controlled her life. "You have always been predictable, Richard. Your biggest mistake was thinking you knew me completely, that you could control every aspect of my life. But do you know what your biggest mistake was?" She took a step toward him, years of submission transformed into strength. "You forgot that I was the one who structured the company's information system. Every document, every transaction, every decision, it all passed through me before reaching you. And while you were busy maintaining your image of power, I was guarding the evidence." The bank doors opened and Marina entered, accompanied not only by her lawyer, but also by 2 federal agents. In her hands was a folder containing documents that would prove not only Vale Verde's unethical practices, but also a series of fiscal and administrative irregularities that Richard had tried to hide for years. The afternoon sun bathed the vineyards of Valle Dorado in golden light as the last police cars left the property. Richard had been taken in for questioning, along with several executives involved in the scheme. Television networks broadcast, live every development in the case, transforming the story of Valle Dorado into a symbol of resistance and renewal. Elisa stood on the mansion's balcony, watching the workers move among the vines. The consortium project was already beginning to show results. 5 wineries in the region had officially joined forces, sharing resources and knowledge while maintaining their unique identities. "I thought I'd find you here." Eric's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. He approached, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "The sunset from here always helps me put things into perspective," she replied, accepting the offered glass. "Did you know that this was the exact spot where I had my first flash of memory?" Eric smiled, leaning against the railing beside her. "And now, with all your memories restored, who are you really?" Elisa contemplated the question for a moment, staring at the ruby liquid in her glass. "I am all versions of myself. The executive who learned about business, the Aurora, who fell in love with the vineyards, and this new person who has found a purpose greater than herself." Marina appeared on the balcony carrying some documents. "The papers for the Cultural Heritage Registration have just arrived. Valle Dorado is officially protected." The news was greeted with excited smiles. The hard work of the last few months had finally come to fruition, something that would ensure the preservation of not only the winery, but its entire history and significance. "You know what's funny?" Elisa commented, her amber eyes reflecting the last ray of sunlight. "I came here to destroy this place, and I ended up being rebuilt by it." Eric pulled her close, gently kissing her forehead. "The best wines are born from unexpected transformations. What was just grapes becomes something extraordinary, unique." Marina watched the couple with motherly eyes. "And now, what are the next steps?" Elisa smiled, a smile that combined the executive's confidence with the serenity she had found in the vineyards. "Now we are going to expand the consortium. We already have 15 wineries interested in joining the project. Each one has its own history, its own tradition, but united by a common purpose. And Valle Dorado will be the heart of it all," Eric added proudly. Twilight colored the sky with purple and orange hues, creating a spectacle worthy of a painting. In the vineyards, the workers were finishing another day of work, satisfied with the progress they saw around them. Elisa took a deep breath, absorbing the familiar scent of the earth, the vines and the wine in her glass. Every decision, every path she had taken, even the wrong ones, had led her here, to this moment, to this place, to this love. "You know," she said softly to Eric, "we have a lot of work ahead of us." He smiled, lacing his fingers with hers. "Yes, but now we have something we've never had before, a clear vision of the future we want to build." Marina raised her glass in a silent toast, and the 3 of them stood there watching the day give way to night as the first stars began to dot the sky over Valle Dorado. The wine in their glasses, a special blend they had created to celebrate the new beginning, was a promise of what was to come. A perfect blend of tradition and innovation, of past and future, of old memories and new dreams. 6 months had passed since Richard's fall. Golden Valley was preparing for its first harvest since the transformation. Sunrise found Elisa walking among the vines, checking the ripeness of the grapes. The morning dew wet her feet as she delicately touched the bunches, a gesture she had learned from Eric, and that was now part of her daily routine. "The Merlots are perfect," she wrote on her tablet, where a new integrated management system, developed especially for the winery consortium, recorded every detail of the production. The sound of approaching vehicles caught his attention. A small caravan of cars and vans was passing through the gates of the property. They were representatives of the wineries in the consortium, arriving for the event that would mark the official beginning of the new phase. Marina, impeccably dressed, in her traditional uniform with a special consortium brooch, coordinated the reception of visitors. The housekeeper, who had become a kind of informal ambassador for the project, knew each owner by name and knew exactly how to make them feel at home. "Donna Aurora, or should I say Elisa," joked Seu Jose, one of the oldest producers in the region, getting out of his truck. "The vines are magnificent." Elisa smiled, hugging the old winemaker. It was amazing how her double name had become a kind of symbol of transformation among the members of the consortium. Some called her Elisa, others Aurora, and she had learned to embrace both identities as equally important parts of who she was. Eric emerged from the wine cellar, where he had spent the morning preparing a special surprise. Over the past few months, while coordinating the expansion of the consortium, he and Elisa had been secretly working on a side project, a wine that would represent the union of all the participating wineries. "Is everything ready?" she asked softly as he approached. "Perfect," he replied, stealing a quick kiss. "The blend turned out exactly as we planned." The mansion's courtyard had been transformed into a space for celebration, tables elegantly decorated with white. Tablecloths and wildflower arrangements formed a circle, symbolizing unity and equality among the members of the consortium. In the center, an exhibition told the story of each participating winery, with old photos and significant objects. As the morning progressed, more guests arrived: wine journalists, renowned chefs, sommeliers, and even some international critics who had expressed interest in the consortium's innovative initiative. Among them were familiar faces from the old Vale Verde, executives who had chosen to follow Elisa on her new journey, leaving sterile offices for more meaningful work. Connected to the land, atención, Marina called in Spanish, an inside joke that had emerged during one of the consortium's first meetings. "I invite you to take your seats for the beginning of the ceremony." Elisa stepped onto a small makeshift stage, her elegant figure contrasting harmoniously with the rustic scenery of the vineyards in the background. Eric remained by her side, their hands discreetly joined, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by those present. "A year ago," she began, her voice carrying the same authority as always, but now tempered with a softness that only living among the vineyards could provide, "I came to Valle Dorado with a mission very different from the one I carry out today. Fate, however, had other plans." His eyes scanned the audience, finding faces that represented generations of winemaking knowledge, stories of perseverance and love for the land. "The consortium we officially inaugurate today is not just a commercial alliance. It is a commitment to preserving our cultural heritage, a pact between past and future. Each winery represented here maintains its unique identity, its traditions, and its family secrets. But now united, we are stronger." Eric took the floor, adding, "And to symbolize this union, Marina, please." The housekeeper appeared carrying a special bottle, its label still covered by a silk cloth. It was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the unveiling of the first wine produced collectively by the consortium. The bottle rested in Marina's hands like a precious jewel. With a gentle gesture, she removed the silk fabric, revealing an elegant label that read, "Renacenza, first blend of the consortium of traditional wineries." "This wine," Elisa explained as the first bottle was opened, "carries a little bit of each of our wineries, the grapes were carefully selected from each property, respecting the unique characteristics of each terroir. The sound of the cork being removed echoed in the expectant silence. The rich, complex aroma of the wine immediately filled the air, prompting appreciative murmurs among the experts present. The blend, Eric continued, as Marina and other helpers began pouring glasses, was created to represent our diversity. Merlot from Valle Dorado, Cabernet Sauvignon from Vinícola São Pedro, Tannat from Viñedos Aurora. He paused, smiling at Elisa as he mentioned the last name. The glasses were held up to the light, revealing a deep, brilliant red. The first sip was followed by expressions of genuine surprise and approval. The wine was exceptional, a perfect marriage of tradition and innovation. "There's something else," Elisa announced, nodding to Marina. The housekeeper returned with a second bottle, this time of the 1985 Valle Dorado vintage that had won the festival. Because today, we don't just celebrate the future, we honor our past as well. The two bottles side by side told a story of transformation. One represented a tradition that was almost lost, the other symbolized rebirth through unity. As guests sampled the wines and shared their impressions, Elisa and Eric quietly walked away to one of the property's viewpoints. The midday sun illuminated the vineyards, creating a carpet of green and gold that stretched to the horizon. "Thinking about what?" Eric asked, noticing Elisa's contemplative look. "How unpredictable life is," she replied, leaning against the windowsill of the gazebo. "I came here to destroy something beautiful and ended up finding my true essence, like a wine that needs to go through transformations to reveal its true character." He hugged her from behind, both of them looking out at the landscape that had witnessed their love story. "You know what they say about great wines, that they are made primarily in the vineyard. Everything else, the technique, the technology, are just tools to let the true essence of the grape come through." "Like people?" She smiled, turning in his arms. "Just like people," he confirmed, kissing her softly. From the courtyard came the sound of excited voices, laughter and clinking glasses. The consortium was not just a commercial success, it was a community reborn, an expanded family united by a love of wine and the land. Marina appeared at the lookout, her eyes shining with excitement. "The journalists are asking for more details about the consortium's upcoming projects, and Mr. Jose is telling everyone how you two fell in love among the grapevines." Elisa laughed, lacing her fingers with Eric's. "Let's go back. After all, this is just the first page of our new story." Together they returned to the celebration, where each glass raised was a toast not only to wine, but to transformation, love, and the courage to begin again. The Valle Dorado, once on the brink of oblivion, now pulsed with renewed life, its vineyards silent witnesses that sometimes you have to get lost to find your true path. And so, amidst the aromas of ripe grapes and the promise of the future, Elisa and Eric sealed their commitment not only to each other,